Welcome to Community Forum. My name is John Goliatino. I'm your host. This evening we're going to be changing gears. Once again, we're going back to the political sphere. And with me this evening is Gary Concavas, who ran for mayor this past year. And we're going to be sharing what he's doing now with you and some ideas on what's going on in this coming November. So I want to welcome you, Gary, to the show.
Thanks, John. Always a pleasure.
Yes, the same here. Tell us a little bit, before we get into some questions we have here, tell us a little bit about yourself, as how long you've been in Danbury, a little bit about your family.
Well, I was born and raised in Danbury, attended public schools, went to the high school, and my family, my wife and my children, are also Danbury natives, so we're kind of what you call in Brooklyn fixtures.
Fixtures, okay. And what have you been doing since the November election where you ran for mayor?
That's a good question, John. Actually, I had worked for a company in Stamford called called General Reinsurance, which is
a subsidiary.
Berkshire Hathaway big cash cow. And I retired after 30 years last year in 2009. And at this point, I'm still retired, but I'm doing a lot of volunteer work. Well, I'll tell you what.
Okay.
It keeps me very busy. I'm the president of the board of directors of a nonprofit in Brookfield that does a lot of things for children and families with behavioral disorders. I am on the board of directors of the Lebanon American Club, which does a lot not only for the Lebanese community but also for the community of Danbury. I'm a member at the Portuguese Cultural Center, and I'm helping with their golf tournament. And I'm still involved with the Democratic Party here, trying to help the new chair, Lynn Tabersack, kind of reshape the party and make it more viable going forward.
You're helping with their strategy a little bit.
A little bit with the strategy, yeah.
Okay.
From my corporate
from your corporate
life,
background,
I am a trained facilitator, and I think those skills will help her progress forward.
That's very good. Now, there are some prominent concerns for the city that you brought out during your campaign for mayor. What are your thoughts on some of these concerns?
Well, I think one of those top concerns, as I remember, was our education system in Danbury, which at this point is failing by a number of measures. And I was very concerned about keeping educators in the classroom. As I said last year, the early retirement package that was really more or less imposed on the Board of Education by the current administration because of our long-term debt service, virtually decimated our school system. And now we're into a new budget cycle, and already they're talking about 45 positions perhaps going, and 21 teaching positions. And in a system that's already failing, that concerns me greatly. I'm fortunate; my children are older, so I don't have them in the school system anymore. One's a college graduate, the other one is graduating at the end of the month, thank God. But I would be very concerned if I had young children in the Danbury school system right now. And we've still got some excellent teachers, but every year seems to be fewer and fewer of them.
Right.
And I was going to, John, as you know, too, I talked about math and science being two big hitters on my radar screen. I think, in my corporate life, I had the occasion to travel. I've been to India, and as I said numerous times, the children over there are very bright. They're very skilled, they're well trained, they're very well educated, especially in the areas of math and science. And I think our children, even the top children in those fields, are falling behind the rest of the world. And I think those are concentrations that we really have to focus on for our kids to compete in a global economy.
That's true. We tend to, though, spend more in both in two major areas than most of the world. So it might be the effectiveness of our spending. In the health care and in education, we tend to spend more in those areas all over the world. So it's an effective type of thing, you know, how effective our systems are, and it's almost like a case of how it's all administered.
Yeah,
you know?
I mean, the facts actually bear out that our education system is well behind the leaders in the world. And again, we talk about a global economy. It means that our children, for the first time, are having to compete with jobs in this country with children from other countries.
That's true. Now, something since that election has really come to bear fruit. You know, you indicated the violations that were going on in the firefighter situation. You know, how the mayor was taking people that weren't on the list, or practically ignoring the fire list. You know, the people that had taken the tests for firefighter. And there's been some recent news out. In fact, it was front page news on that. What are your thoughts on that whole situation?
You know, Jen, just to go back to what you mentioned, I don't know what part the mayor may or may not have played in this. I know that at the time this was looming out there, and I thought it was a big concern for the city because of the potential settlement of the lawsuit that would be occurring eventually. And as you've read in the paper, we settled, I guess the city settled for $450,000, but, you know, frankly, you know, that's a lot of money for the reason of administrative mistakes, as the paper had reported. But the $450,000, I want to point out, does not include the cost of outside counsel and whatever the city councils you know, were paid. So, I mean, the cost of that lawsuit coming to settlement is
probably
much
closer
more.
to $700,000, $750,000.
Well, maybe even more than that. When you retain outside counsel, you're paying a lot of money.
Right.
I know that from my corporate days too. So, but it's a shame that it had to happen. And
well, there's different things that are out there. Some that he ignored the list, and then there's some that he took a couple of names off of there, and then went to another list that had.
Well, there's actually, the brief is out there on a blog that's prominent in the city, and if you look through it, I mean, again, I had to question in the campaign how somebody who was ranked 108th on the list, and who also was the civil service chairman son, could jump from 108th to get a job with the city.
In the top 8 or whatever it was, the top 10. Yeah.
You know, so, but you know, who was involved and what administrative errors were made, I couldn't say. I just know that the citizens of Danbury are paying for it.
Right, that's true. And then the area downtown redevelopment.
Yeah. Well, again, you know, I'm talking to you tonight not as a candidate, but just as a concerned citizen of Danbury. And you know, since you're asking the question, this was another, you know, big spot on my radar screen. The downtown can be revitalized. I think I've seen it done. I've worked in Stamford for 30 years. I saw under then Stamford Mayor Dan Malloy how Stamford was rejuvenated. The downtown is somewhere you can walk through at night. It's full of nightlife. It's got great eating places, and you can have a lot of fun and feel safe. He's done a lot of things down there, and I think the same type of things could have been done here. Now, I know there's a Renaissance Commission, and there's an awful lot of very good people on that commission. But again, we're 9 years into an administration, and little or nothing has been done down there. And again, I'm just speaking as a concerned citizen. I think there are things that we could have done to attract more people down there, free up some parking in front of stores. I mean, I know we have parking garages, but quite frankly, you know, we had a great restaurant down there named Chow's, and you know, in the winter months, people are not going to walk, you know, park in that parking garage and walk across that windy, cold green, you know, especially if you're on the elderly side. So I just think there was more things that could have been done, and certainly right now we're still waiting for the Renaissance Commission to come forward with its plan.
During the News Times editorial debate, you asked the mayor if he was elected, would he fill his full term? And if I remember correctly, you said he said, I should say, yes. But now he's running for governor. Any comments?
Well, and again, I'm not talking as a candidate. I'm talking about, as a concerned citizen. And I did ask that question of the mayor at that time, and he did say he would serve his full term in Danbury. So, I'm going to hold my own personal opinion and comments and just say that, this was something that was recorded by the editorial board of the News Times and was on tape, and I'm sure people still have it. And I just leave it to the citizens of Danbury. I leave his answer to the citizens of Danbury and whether they think they're getting 100% out of their mayor at this point in time, because as anyone knows, John, you've run before for elected office, and especially on a statewide level, it takes a lot of time. You're out at night, you're attending debates, you're strategizing with your people, and you're attending functions all over the state. So, I'll just leave it to the people of Danbury and the citizens of Danbury. If they think they're getting 100% out of the mayor, then it's fine. If they don't, well, then that's their problem with him.
There was an interesting editorial by a former Marine general, if I'm not mistaken, about editorial letter to the editor, I meant to say, where he goes on and on about the roads are in poor repair and how come you're not following up on the potholes and whatnot all over town. Yes. Because he alluding to the fact he's off running for running for governor or running for lieutenant governor, whatever that may be.
I actually happen to know that general because he's involved with one of the clubs that I'm a participant at, and he had written a prior letter, opinion of the people, to the paper about the same subject. And again, one of my concerns when I ran was that the roads were in the worst condition that I've ever seen them. I mean, he alluded to, I think in the editorial that you're speaking about, that there's actually, besides potholes, there's actually foxholes out there. And I've seen some of them, and I've barely just missed some, and because I would have lost a tire had I hit it. But
you lose your car. One of those holes.
So I just think that there's got to be more attention paid to the infrastructure here, especially the roadways. And I know there's a lot of people, especially on the outskirts of town, that have waited a long time for their roads to be paved, and I don't see it forthcoming now because of the budget dilemma.
I almost want to venture forth this point. I recall it was in the newspaper, and that's why I'm saying it. I recall it being in the newspaper that Mayor Boughton said he had received money from the Obama administration and he wasn't going to spend it this year for road work. That he was going to spend it in the next year. And that didn't make any sense because it was supposed to be stimulus money to get the economy going and to redo all the roads that needed to be fixed this year. Yeah. And that was reported in the News Times. And I'm saying to myself, why is he not spending it until next year? Didn't make any sense to me.
I couldn't answer, but I mean,
I remember this.
To me, the stimulus money should be spent as quickly as we get it, because it took a while to get out to everybody, and
especially if you got potholes you got to fill. Well, why are you holding off?
That's true.
And maybe because it's an election year next year. I don't know. What's your take on the state's election in general, aside from Mayor Mark's attempts in that category?
I think it's a very interesting situation. I think we've got
2 millionaires that want to be governor.
We've got a few millionaires in there at the gubernatorial level. I think we've got some excellent Democratic candidates at the gubernatorial level, as well as some excellent Democratic candidates for Secretary of State and Attorney General and other positions. In the governor's race, I mean, I happen to know a lot of these people personally. We've got Rudy Marconi from Richfield, who has been a great first selectman, certainly a smart man, presents himself very well. We've got Ned Lamont, who actually did some campaigning for me, and who's been a very successful businessman over the years. And then we've got Dan Malloy, as I mentioned, from Stamford, and Dan is I think he makes a very good gubernatorial candidate. He's run a major city. He's transformed Stamford, because I worked there. I saw the transformation because all 14 of his years were part of the 30 that I worked down there, and I saw it go from one of the non-safest cities in the state or the region to one of the safest cities. I've seen him rejuvenate
Do I hear an endorsement in there?
Well,
okay.
Dan did an awful lot for me too, but
okay.
I wouldn't speak so highly of him or the others if I didn't believe in them. But I firmly believe that Dan would make a great candidate for governor, and he's got all the tools. He's an ex-finance person, he's an ex-lawyer, and he served 14 years and turned around a major city in Connecticut. And those same skills are going to be needed for the next governor who takes over because of this budget situation we're in here in Connecticut after the Republican administration that we've had in power for so long.
Yeah, they were basically just borrowing money to cover current expenses.
They were borrowing money, and what they also did was they were plugging things with stopgap grants and things. And when you start doing that, those items tend to become part of your budget process. And of course, those one-timers are not sustainable over the long term. And again, you got to consider the economy too. But in conjunction with the economy being bad in Connecticut, you got to remember that we've lost a lot of jobs in Connecticut. We are no longer, Hartford is no longer the insurance capital of the country.
Dallas, Texas is.
Well, actually, I've heard Des Moines, Iowa, which they both could be true, but I know it's not Hartford, Connecticut. And there's a lot of challenges that face the next governor, and I think there's people who can do the job on a Democratic side, but I think Dan Malloy, in my mind, is probably the best prepared at this point.
Yeah, what's your take on the senatorial races?
Well, again, we've got, since Chris Dodd stepping aside, I think we've got, you got another...
Two millionaires.
Linda McMahon.
Two millionaires
well,
there.
Yeah, but Dick Blumenthal has shown that he's been a tremendous, AG, Attorney General, and he is well known, well liked, and well respected in the state of Connecticut. And Dick is one of these people that, if you're having a little birthday party at 7 o'clock, he may pop in on you. So he gets around, he knows a lot of people, and he is very well respected across the country as an Attorney General. So I think he'd make a tremendous senator. Myself, yeah. Okay.
And how do you feel on the congressional races? You think that...
Well, I think there's going to be some challenges out there. I think, I like Chris Murphy very much. I like a number of the other congressmen, too, especially Jim Himes and John Larson. I think it's going to be a little bit tougher this time around for a number of reasons. I think one reason is the perception that some people are giving to our current administration in Washington is maybe turning out to be socialists and things like that. I mean, I don't believe that. I mean, don't ask me about the health care reform because I can't explain 2,600 pages. I think the health care reform will be explainable to each of us as it starts affecting us in our own ways. But all I know is right now the economy is back on track. He had to bail out, I believe, a player like AIG had to be bailed out because had they failed, people don't realize all the companies that it would have been a ripple effect, a domino effect down the line, and we would have seen, talk about a recession, we would have been in the depths of depression. I mean, that would have brought our economy literally to its knees and below.
Well, Lehman Brothers shook things up.
Well, that did too. And again,
yeah.
I think what they're trying to do now is put some controls and checks in there because, you had these brokers and companies that were just running amok. I mean, they were putting together tranches and things that were 1,500 pages long.
Yeah.
Explain what were in these things, and they were selling them. So
they were guaranteed by AIG. And they're putting all kinds of garbage in these packages and selling them off for $100,000 or $200,000 packages. And people are saying, "Oh, that's my retirement plan, and I'm getting X number of dollars off of that." As soon as the mortgages went south that were packaged in there, they lost their money,
That
or it went down to a trickle.
I'm not sure what the ranking is now, but it was our #1 insurance company in the country, and
it's not even on the list.
Yeah, well, they'll be back. I mean,
well, give or take 20 years,
exactly.
But
the
because
ripple
it's
effect,
heavy damage to it.
The ripple effect would have been just tremendous, because I was in that business as far as in general reinsurance.
Right.
We worked with AIG, and it would have been devastating. So I think the things that he has done, I think, made sense to do. But you got to have those controls put in there.
It's funny, but that the arguments in the press and everything else, you think that no one else had proposed bailing out the banks or the insurance companies.
Right.
The previous administration had said, we need to take care of this, otherwise we're going to have a depression.
Right.
And Obama just executed. But then you listen to the stuff in the news, it's like, oh, that was the worst thing to do, going all this debt, and that was what was proposed by the previous administration. So it's interesting how operations like Fox News dominates.
Sure.
It's interesting. Under one administration, that was the right thing to do, and the next administration, that's the worst thing that could possibly be done. And yet that saved us for depression. We almost had a full-fledged depression.
Yeah.
We just avoided it.
We just avoided it, and by bailing out these companies, as hard as it is to swallow, he saved a lot of jobs.
Oh, yeah.
And prevented the loss of so many. And these things had to be done. And again, I'll go back to, had the Republicans had their way, we wouldn't have Social Security or Medicare. So, again, I think this thing has to play out. It's not the perfect bill by any means. There had to be some accommodations made to get it through. And again, time will tell, as to whether it's good for the masses or not. But the other things that I think I've seen, I don't think anybody can dispute the case that the economy is rebounding very nicely at this point. So I think the things that President Obama and his administration had done to get that stimulated have had their effect.
Now, what are some of the things that the next governor will have to do, getting back to Connecticut now that we've gone down to Washington for a little bit?
Well,
they get the budget, state budget, and the infrastructure back on track.
Well, you got a big mess. We're billions in a hole, and again, I think first of all, whoever takes over has to sit down with a pencil and go through line item by line item and even sublines, go into that ledger and see what we're paying, what we're spending, what we're bringing in, and what accommodations can be made there. I think, one of the biggest things that has to be done to attract businesses to this state is to do something about electricity rates, because we have the highest electricity rates in the country, and we
supposedly we're decontrolled.
We're decontrolled, but that's kind of a misnomer, because we've got nuclear generating plants in this state that could make money on 2 cents a kilowatt hour, yet because of this decontrol, they're allowed to charge 8 cents or more. So, something has to be done there. States like North Carolina, I think we lose a lot of business to North Carolina because their electricity rates are so cheap. Plus, it's they have a very nice environment for companies to locate there. We've lost a lot of insurance company business. So we've got to do something to make it more attractive for the larger companies to come to Connecticut and do business, and thereby affording our citizens the opportunities for more quality jobs. So electricity rates are big. We've got to look at the budget. We've got to look at also, I think, out-of-the-box ways of maybe contributing more to the education systems in each town and city. I don't think it's sustainable to just ride the backs of the taxpayers.
Because the property tax.
Property taxes. It's just too much.
What you do is eventually you chase the citizenry out of the town, out of the state.
Well, that's a problem too.
Because they can't afford the property taxes when you rely on the property tax to do it all by itself.
No, it can't. And there are states around the union that have done other things, which I know about, but I'll let it be to the next governor to figure out. But we got to attract businesses to the state. We've got to do something about our education system. We've got to do something about electricity rates, and I think it can be done. It's going to be a heck of a lot of work for whoever takes over, but I believe that it can be done with the right person in that office.
Okay, and So what's in the last few minutes?
Sure.
Anything that you're doing specifically? Are you a candidate? I'm not a candidate. A delegate to one of the conventions. With the 21st, I guess, of May. There's, in fact, this will probably be airing right before that convention, or right after it. But it's in the vicinity of that time. We're going to be airing the show. There's going to be the convention, and we'll know who the candidates are for sure.
Yep.
Are you going to that? Or?
Well, John, it's a good question. I've actually been appointed by our new town chair, Lynn Tabersack, to serve on 3 nominating committees. The first we've already had.
To be a delegate to the
delegates, yeah. The first we elected Diane Eppinger and Joe De Silva Jr. as our state Democratic committee people. We've got the state delegate convention, as you mentioned, on the 21st and 22nd of May, and that's going to be a very heavy Saturday, and that's where we're going to, decide, who are going to be elected, or as far as the delegate votes, to governor and attorney general and secretary of state and so on. So that's going to be a very big weekend, and then I believe on the 24th of May, I believe we have at City Hall delegate selection for the 24th Senatorial District, and I hear that there are 2 good candidates. I know Alice Hutchinson from Bethel, former first selectman, former Democratic town chair there, has thrown her hat in an exploratory phase for that seat currently held by Mike McLaughlin. And I think I've heard other names of people from Danbury. I don't believe they've formed committees yet, so I'm hesitant to say on your show. But so I think that's going to be a lively. So we don't have a scoop here as to who that may be. Okay. Well, there's not going to be many scoops. I think you're going to know well in advance. But I don't think it's fair to the candidate if I mention their names if they're not really if they've not formed the committee yet. So, but I think it's going to be an interesting election year, and we'll see. We'll see what public opinion is on a national level, on a local level, and I can only hope that at a local level, and I plead to the citizens of this town and this area, please get out and vote, because it's one of those rights that so many of our citizens and non-citizens have given all their tomorrows for, so we could have today, and that precious right to vote in an open and free election, which is not something that people enjoy around the world. It definitely makes a difference as to funding and what direction a city, state, or a country goes. Absolutely. And that could take years to recover if you go in the wrong direction. So anyway, I want to thank you for coming on the show. John, I appreciate it. And I want to always good being with you. Yeah, the same. And I want to thank the viewers for tuning in the Community Forum. Tune in next week, same time, same station. We'll have another interesting program. Good night for now, and we'll see you then.